This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net. This is May 11th, 2015. Men and Women, the Origin of Differences. This video combines 3 separate shorter parts that were published in 2010 while I had a time limit on YouTube. I'm republishing them now. The total is around half hour. I'm going to preface this video with an abstract from a journal article, the Journal of Comparative Neurology. The title of the article is Neocortical Neuron Number in Humans, Effects of Sex and Age. I think you'll find this reality very interesting. You can stop frame if you want to read this in more detail. You can stop frame if you want to read this in more detail. You can stop frame to read this yourself, or I will have it read to you. You can fast forward if you don't want to hear the abstract read. Abstract. Modern stereological methods provide precise and reliable estimates of the number of neurons in specific regions of the brain. We decided to estimate the total number of neurocortical neurons in the normal human brain and to analyze it with respect to the major macro and microscopical structural components, to study the internal relationships of these components, and to quantitate the influence of important physiological variables on brain structure. The 94 brains reported represent a consecutive collection of brains from a general Danish population. The average number of neurocortical neurons were 19 billion in female brains and 23 billion in male brains, a 16% difference. In our study, which covered the age range from 20 years to 90 years, approximately 10% of all neurocortical neurons are lost over the lifespan in both sexes. Sex and age were the main determinant of the total number of neurons in the human neocortex, whereas body size per se had no influence on the neuron number. Some of the data presented have been analyzed by using new mathematical designs. An equation predicting the total neurocortical neuron number in any individual is in which sex and age are known is provided. J. Comp in the reference. The video is about the genetic differences of men and women and the historical reason that has caused these differences in brain and behavior. In this video, everything, matter, space, and motion, reality, physical reality is what is defined as God, and we're just part of it. And the law of God, which caused this difference, is the law that what makes babies is what makes the genetics of the future. So some insight into what has made us the way we are. And the part that's maybe not emphasized good is there was a culture, a Scandinavian culture, that later called the Vikings, but it was born out of woolly mammoth hunting. There's now evidence that early on that the Europeans were in America, they were hunting the woolly mammoths and following after them. And they built mammoth bone homes and had a culture that did not last long enough to become genetic, but it was very honorable. The Muslims were unable to defeat the settlements in Spain when they occupied for 700 years. Also, the Russian lords, after they had been dominated and the Norse withdrew, they were invited back to rule over the Russian lords because they had so much infighting, and the Scandinavian lords were so honorable in their rule. And also they were invited, as even though they were pagan, they were invited by the Byzantine Christian Empire and hired as mercenaries because they were such good fighters and so honorable. As the Byzantine Empire had become affluent and weakened, and Muslim invasions were taking place. That's the background of culture that got lost now, if you look at what's going on in Sweden and Norway. But these same people were the Visigoths, which came down, and the early home Christian church around the Black Sea, it was a home church foundation, and it converted the Goths, even though they were able to invade and actually end up, if you look at the more accurate knowledge of the history, they had a great influence after conquering Rome, and about 200 years after Christ. But they had the Bible put into their language, and they converted to Christianity. And then they were still conquerors and went to the Visigoths over into France and Spain, leaving behind what now is Amish historical roots of the home church. But with the wars with Muslims and the French lords, they developed this aristocracy that was supported by and encouraged by the Roman Catholic Church, and then later the Visigoths converted, the lords converted to Catholicism with all the honor and prestige that they got from the Pope. But in Germany and in the Alps, the home church of the original foundation, the apostles around the Black Sea, was Matthew and Peter and his wife preached in the land of the seven churches. It's now Turkey, but also Paul. And you can study these things. More of the accurate knowledge is coming about. There was a wonderful book or an article published by an academic, Muslim academic in Istanbul, who got into the records of the Roman history around the Black Sea, the early Christians. And you can find these things. Okay.
It is November 10th, 2009. I'm in the Caucasus Mountain apartment in Russia that I bought about 5 years ago. I've been listening to a radio program recorded from Roy Masters, and it talks about women, and something that I, in the last few years, have come into much deeper understanding as I see how Olga suffers and seems to even be against her own self-interest at times. But to go back, I was interested to learn that men's brains and women's brains were different. Men tend to be logically dominant in one hemisphere, the right hand connected to the left hemisphere, and that being logically dominant, and the left hand connected to the right hemisphere, and that being pattern dominant, nonverbal. That this difference exists in women and is one of the reasons that in certain assembly line tasks, women tend to do much better than men. And historically in mathematics and logic, men have enjoyed it much more than women. We went through Moscow. The first thing they got was computer internet cafes or internet places where you could go. And all over Moscow, when we needed to send an email, we would look for one of these internet places, and what we would find every time was boys there playing games. Not girls, boys. Boys and girls are different. As a teacher and as a father of 3 and a grandfather of 13 and 4 stepchildren, I've seen just the natural difference, not because they were treated different, but because they're born different. Anyway, I've come to understand that the need for women to have control is historic, the way they have control, that women have historically been the victims of warfare, the prize to the winner. They have learned to submit to the dominator, but then get what they want out of it, to decide whether they want to keep a baby or not, if they want to love it or not, to all of these things. Of course, the mammalian care of early childhood is what either gives or takes away the ability to love. I like what Jesus said, that he needed to go, that he would send the Spirit of truth that would teach us all things. We need to study reality and learn. That's what he said, that the Spirit of truth would teach. And he said that the most important commandment was to love thy neighbor as thyself, and to love the source of existence with all your culture, with all your outlook, with all your mental strength. Of course, we need to heal from all the damage done to us to be able to do this, and it can be very difficult. But if an infant is deprived of the mammalian level lacto-tactile contact love in a bond with the suckling bond with the mother, and then as a human they lack the human father qualities from 5 until adulthood to be protected and separated from the suffocating domination of the mother and manipulation of the mother, then they don't have the opportunity to grow. Again, understanding that historically, like Abraham moved from Ur of the Chaldees to the north, and they were worshiping all kinds of gods and planets, and they had been a wealthy nation with the Euphrates River and the ocean ports. They had affluence, and like with all affluence, the women would hire wet nurses, and the children would be deprived of that necessary bond to become fully mammalian human. and they were sacrificed. They didn't want their children, just like now. There are approximately 60 million babies murdered legally a year now through abortion. And in those days, what they did is they invented gods and fires to sacrifice their babies to these gods, arms that they rolled on. You can read about the priests beating drums so that they wouldn't hear the baby cry as it went into the fire. But anyway, that's what Abraham was an archetype to make a more mammalian human culture, to move away from this corruption that affluence had brought. And where they knew about the stars and planets from the prehistoric sailors, they also knew that there was a point in the sky that everything rotated around and there was nothing there, an emblem of the Most High unseen God, to stop the worship of these idols and the sacrifice of children. And then Abraham was an archetype to show, replace the human sacrifice with an animal sacrifice, and something you can eat. Sacrifice a lamb. Very thankful for that. But to realize that women have no choice. They want a tribal society because they can manipulate the powers that be. Just like in the Catholic Church in Niagara Falls, New York, it's the Italian women, or the women that have the main involvement in the church, and the priest is their helper in dealing with things. Just like so many of the evangelical Christians, when I went on internet looking for a Christian wife, I found so many evangelicals, and found two things. One, they were divorced. They had the support of the church and were divorced. The church preaches to the women. And two, if you ask them what they want, they believed in God, to pray for husband, to pray for job, to pray for give me, give me, give me. They believed in a God that served them like they were having God as a servant. Anyway, that aside, women are the victims of God's nature. In God, in reality, the aggressive forces in human history have often caused rape and domination, and taking women as a prize. And women have learned to live with this and get power by manipulation and intrigue. And that's the way nature, that is, God made them. And I see Olga suffer with this. She would like to be logical and have integrity, but her security and her ways of justifying herself are more than she can overcome. And I saw it in Pat, my first wife, and her conflict killed her. It did so much damage to her children. They're not free. But anyway, I'm going to play Roy Masters, what he said, because he puts it in the framework of religion. But I like what Bruno Bettelheim said when I spoke to him at the colloquium at State University of New York at Buffalo. He was making his retirement tour. I asked him if he was religious. He says, no, he's Jewish, but not religion. What did he think of the Bible? And he said that these stories, folk tales that survived the storytelling cultures, were health-giving stories, that the foolish ones got dropped, but the stories like the jealous brother you can find in many different cultures, because the story has a value to it. And in the same with what we find in the Bible, there are many other things I need to say when talking about the Bible. I don't want to get distracted into that now. I want to keep on this. Women have a problem with manipulation and deception and divisiveness that they have no real control over. It's a part of them that they have to deal with. And men have to understand and deal with. It's a shame that, like, two things. The Swedish culture was not invaded and dominated by others. They were the invaders. And it grew up a relatively healthy culture, and the men had control and farmed and sailed, and their wives were required to be loyal. But the whole Christian and Greek, like in Sparta, way of men having control and being responsible to God as they believed in Him, or to the community. That men were responsible, but they also had control over what they were responsible for. And this gives an opportunity for the man to protect the child that he loves so much, as well as protecting the home and community that he can grow to love. And I'll talk more about that later. But right now I want to play this part of Roy Masters' tape and have you listen to it.
Which is the question is, still have a problem resenting husband. Still means this lady has listened before and has the meditation. Is that correct, Emma?
Hi, Mr. Masters. Yes, it is. This is Emma in Venice. I called you from Colorado on December 17th on the day my father died, and you walked me through that whole scenario.
Yes.
And I actually had a healing that I wanted to tell you first. I have hated my mother my whole life, and that very night you told me to just watch the irritation before it builds up, and I feel like I've been cured.
It's magical, isn't it?
I mean, it was like you said, in the twinkling of an eye, and I'm 49, and I'm telling you, I hated this woman my whole life, and it still hasn't come back, which is like a record.
It's like it's not important anymore.
It's like it's not.
However, you must.
I stopped just a minute to add. I don't know how whether it's something on me or just happenstance, but Pat hated her mother, and with reason. She used to have to go through the dirty clothes to find the cleanest thing to wear to school. Her mother was freed by the Second World War and stayed in the factory rather than being a home mother. And Olga, mother, suffered terribly. Her grandfather, her grandmother was multiple sclerosis and died. Lived with the rape.
I need to make a brief correction here. That was my son's first wife's mother that died of MS. Olga's grandmother, Olga's mother's mother, died from clogged arteries, and she was raised by her harsh grandmother. That would be Olga's great-grandmother, who was kind of a harsh person.
Grandma, who was a witch, and the father committed suicide, and so her mother grew up without any much love and not able to give love. Olga has some because her grandma, her father's mother, lived in an apartment with them and gave Olga love. So she has some liberation, I'm glad to say.
Now you must do the same magic with your husband.
Yes, and I called you about that because I felt like I didn't even want to come back to California. And what's happened is that I catch it and I do pretty good.
No, it's not pretty good. It's not good enough.
Well, what happens is...
No, where's the magic?
That's exactly right.
Where's the magic?
No.
Well, because it's a woman thing. You see, it's a woman thing. It's a woman thing that women have with men. It's systemic. It goes back to Eve, to put it rather mildly. You were born with a seductive influence over men and sort of a maternal superiority, like Mother Superior, quietly. You may not know you have it, but you're an emotional thinker. You've been an emotional thinker all your life. And I don't... There's a rare woman that will admit that they feel superior to men.
Well, Roy uses the folk tales, but in any case, even to say more clearly that it is a process of survival, that God's nature conditioned women this way, and there's part of it is in the genes, in the genetic code. No matter how we say it, the description of a thing is not the thing. Roy sees something. Whether his description of it conveys the reality very accurate or not, or whether talking about the women being historically victims of invasion and subjugation and survival in that environment has left its mark genetically, possibly in those mitochondria. I don't know, but anyway, the description of the thing is not the thing. It's there. Some people can see it, and it's a real problem, because modern cultures are in a self-destructive mode. Like here in Russia, they're murdering more babies than live births. The culture is in decay, and the ascendancy is a murderous cult where the women are in subjection. I'm of course hopeful that there will be some intelligent response to the reality of what a baby needs to be able to love, to be able to be free from the suffocating love as they get older, and have the fellowship to become members of a work team, to enjoy life and work on self-sufficiency and productivity, and to be able to protect themselves and a home, and hopefully to be a father model for children, and women to be a mother model for children, and that they can build healthy communities and grow to love their home and work together with others that love their home to make communities and schools that they love, to work together to make a country that they love, and society and the reality of existence that they love, and a future that they're willing to take the gifts that have been given in the past and see creating a better world is their opportunity to give something for the future, and that part of them that they can see, that they have a vision of the future that is better than today, as those before them had a vision of the future better than their day, and were willing to give out of love and sacrifice out of love for the future, and that this gives purpose, and that soul, that culture in the person, that sovereign part of them that invests as a group, that goes on from child to child, that is a reincarnation of a kind. It's a spiritual born again. It's that spirit of love which Jesus showed, that he commanded to love one another. The commandment means nothing if we don't have the ability, the mammalian ability, and the human the mammalian maternal gifts and the human paternal gifts to be able to love humankind and protect it and grow in that love and love our source of existence and enjoy studying it as I have in physics and mathematics. I'll sign off for now. The purpose of this topic was to share some insight that you might have, that you would see that others have, that women have a problem. Historically, they have been victims and have learned to survive by being less than honorable, by manipulating, by lying, by stealing, by degrading those who they betray so as to justify betraying them. Not simple matters, but at any rate, it's part of life. I thank you for the opportunity to share this topic on women and their difficulty. I would put it in the category of the individual, and particularly the human female individual. Thank you.
Men and women are different. Men have 4 billion more brain cells. I would end this by reminding you again of another trait, that young women are attracted to the invader. That's why when I was a teacher and they moved blacks into the suburbs, I taught in a suburban high school, at the dances there was a problem. At a faculty meeting they said, we got to help these black girls. The black boys like the white girls and the white girls like the black boys, but the white boys don't like the black girls. So we have a dance and there's nobody invites them. They come on the black girls come on their own, and then nobody wants to dance with them. And it has nothing to do with black and white. It has to do with what's recognized as the invader. Any military man who has, whether it was the Japanese going to China or the Americans going to Germany, the young women are attracted to the invader, and that is a survival trait because they're the ones that tended to have babies, so it became a genetic trait. So try to understand this, and it's a serious problem for the minority women. The men are the invaders, and the majority of women are attracted to them.